I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here today with Dr. Iris Freelander, and we'd like to talk to you about great expectations. In New Thought metaphysical philosophy, we talk a lot about the fact that we live in our minds and not in the world. What that means is that the way that we think, the things that go on in our thought process, determine how we see the world and how we feel about life in general. And that means that the experiences that you and I have are really a composite and the result of the way that we think. We may not be creating the reality in which we exist completely and totally, but we are totally and completely creating the way that we feel about the environment, about the experiences of life, by the way that we think about them. I'm often amazed at how many people have limited expectations about their lives. And one of the things that we teach is to have an expectation of great good in the midst of every circumstance and situation. And that sounds kind of Pollyanna, especially because we know that in life we have a lot of disappointments, we have a lot of challenges. But if we're able to cultivate a way of thinking in ourselves and in those around us of expecting great good out of circumstances and situations, our expectations generally will always come about, won't they? And if we have expectations of something that's negative, those expectations will be met. And it is this creative process of mind that we all live with all the time. And so often we don't realize how much power we have to control our life and our existence through the expectations that we have.
Yes, and whatever Job said, that which I feared has come upon me. By the same token, when people don't set goals in their lives and don't expect much out of life, that's what they get, not much. But if we have goals and plans, and if we work toward those, without being dogmatic about it, but just expect it, just to expect it. Because we get pretty much what we expect, don't we?
We do, and we need to have the expectation of good, and we need to have the expectation that something positive is coming out of every experience. And that's very difficult for a lot of people to conceptualize and to embrace. But we teach at the center, and as we counsel people, that's exactly what we teach, so that when life brings us the experiences, the negative experiences that it's going to bring, we will be able to deal with them in a positive and affirmative way. And the fact is that every experience brings us something, and it brings us a lesson, it brings us the ability to grow stronger. Now, in the midst of the experience, we may suffer and we may have pain and we may have a lot of negative influences. And that's normal. That's a normal process. But just as you said, and one of the things that we talk about so often in Job is that which I have feared has come upon me. And so how many times we can talk about people who fear a certain disease and they get that disease? How many times in the counseling with people we talk to people and say a divorce or a relationship has ended, and you and your counseling work, and I've certainly had it many, many times, where someone will say, this happens to me every time. This happens to me in every relationship. I get these terrible men, or I get these terrible women, or I never am able to make it in life. Well, what's happening is their mental dynamic is creating an expectation of exactly what they're receiving. And so if the expectation changes, then the reality will change. But even more importantly, if the reality doesn't change, their way of thinking about it will change. And there's certainly nothing positive in a damaged relationship to be saying, this always happens to me, and no relationship that I'm ever in succeeds. Well, of course, that mentality and that expectation is going to bring about a relationship that's never going to succeed. All we're doing is confirming our own negativity. And so often we do that in life, and it is a matter of what we expect. What we expect. What do we expect from the world? What do we expect from our circle of friends, our family, our children, our work environment? Do we expect the best? Do we expect good things? And then in the face of things that aren't good, do we still expect good? And that mindset creates for us the most creative and dynamic power to be able to deal with problems and with difficulties.
Totally. And when we're in that position, we forget to connect the dots. If we connect the dots, we'll see, well, we brought this on ourselves. It's a pattern. And some people need counseling and some don't. And those who do usually just need to be reminded of what they already know. And if we'll take that reminder and go with it, then our life changes. But sometimes we just have to have those reminders. But it's if we have if we have great expectations, even in the face of greatest adversity, then it makes a difference, as you just said. It makes a difference in how we react to that circumstance and situation, and it makes a difference in how the people around us react to us.
Mhm.
And we owe it to our family, friends, and to society to keep an equilibrium, to know where we're going and what we're doing, and to do that.
Mhm.
And where we're going is with those great expectations to expect the best of everything. And some people say that's just my luck. And sure enough, they don't have very good luck because they expect that it's just their luck. And they accentuate the negative aspect in their lives. And perhaps they have as much good luck as anyone else, but they just accentuate the negative.
Mhm. I'm thinking of someone that I spoke to recently who lost their job, and in midlife, or actually late in life, later life, and he's in his 50s, wasn't prepared for retirement, had children in college, great financial commitments, and no financial resources. And of course, one of the most paralyzing things that people experience next to death and terminal illness and relationship ending is a work situation that ends and the livelihood is gone, and especially when we have others who rely upon us. And so this gentleman, of course, as we would expect, was devastated by this. And that's normal. It's a normal process. But as we are talking about it and talking about the fact that his job was lost, he had worked for a company for many years, he felt he had been poorly treated, he was articulating all of the things that had happened, all of which were true. He's a good worker, he's an honest person, this shouldn't have happened to him, the company wasn't fair, but that's done. You are now unemployed. Now what do you do? And it's all right to grieve, and it's all right to vent, and we certainly should do that. We're not talking about it all repressing how we feel, because a lot of negativity can come from that. But what we are saying is that once the smoke is cleared and we've gone through the emotionalism, now it's up to us and how we think about it. And one of the things, and I'll just say his name was John, one of the things I said was, John, I bet you can get a great job. I bet you can get as good a job as you had, or a better job, and a job that you'll be happier in. And of course he said, well, I hope so. Well, it's one thing, and it's hard. It's hard when you're unemployed and faced with that. But if his expectation is that that's going to happen, and then I will kind of go back in time to a young lady that you've heard me, I've used this in the church and different lectures that I've given, where a young lady came a number of years ago, similar situation, except she was young. She was by herself, sole support, lost her job, had no money for her apartment, was losing her house, her apartment, her car. She came to the church and came to the center and went through counseling, couldn't get a job, had no choice but to go and live with her sister in Chicago. She didn't like her sister. They had had a bad relationship. She never could get along, but she had no choice. She got on the telephone and she called her sister and said, could I please come until I can get myself on my feet? Her sister said, yes, you can come, but I'm not really happy because my husband's here and our house is in, had all the problems. And she came back to me and she said, Dr. Costello, I think that this is a big mistake, but I don't have any choice. And I said, go with a positive expectation. Go with the feeling that something good is going to happen. She went to Chicago, moved in with her sister. It wasn't all roses, but she and her sister reconciled in this process. She found a job in Chicago that she liked, that was better than the job that she had here in Long Beach. She hated Chicago because of the weather, but she came to like it. In her job, she met the man who became her husband. And some years later, she was visiting in Southern California, and she said, do you remember when I talked to you when I lost my job in Long Beach and I thought it was the end of the world? And when I went to Chicago, all of these things happened. My sister and I reconciled. I got a better job. I met my husband, and my home is in Chicago, and I've never been happier. Well, her expectation, although she went with some trepidation, her expectation was that, all right, I'll go. And she kept that thought. Think if we could embrace that thought from the beginning and go into the experience. If this man, John, could say, yes, I'm hurt. Yes, I have these problems, but something good is going to happen, and I'm going to find a job. That would become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and he would find a job.
And he would certainly. And it's often very difficult for people. But again, if they just have faith, everyone's faith is going to be justified. So if we have faith in ourselves, faith in society, faith in everything around us, faith in a higher source, then that faith will always be justified. And I've seen it happen over and over. I remember asking an older man who was an author and I thought, a very wise man, when I was quite young, how do I address a family whose child has died, and the mother was driving the car, and child was thrown out of the car through the back door. It was a van type of automobile. And and someone asked me to just to write those people a letter and give them encouragement and hope. And it seemed beyond me. So I asked this very wonderful man to help me write that. And the older man said, I know that your faith is going to be justified. And those words stuck with me all these years. So I think we can, each of us, have certain phrases that lift us, certain phrases that sustain us, and then live those phrases and not just say them, but truly live them. And it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference in our lives. And then our great expectations will always be justified.
Absolutely. One of the fundamentals of our faith tradition is to always expect good in the midst of every circumstance. And that's what we say, is that there is good in the midst of every circumstance. We may not be able to see it, but there is good. And the other thing that we teach, and that metaphysics and New Thought teaches, is the reality of divine order. Now, that's maybe new to some people of different religions and different more traditional spiritual backgrounds. But the premise of divine order is that there is divine order. That is, that there is the peace and the presence and the spiritual truth of divine order always and everywhere. But what happens is that in the experiences of life in this world, there are experiences that appear not to be a part of divine order, that appear not to have anything to do with God. And of course, a source of that is so often when something terrible happens, say a child dies, or a loved one dies, or some tragedy happens, or the Holocaust comes, or these different terrible, horrible things, when people say God doesn't exist. Well, the fact is the divine order is in the midst of all of these things. But in this physical life, there are a myriad of experiences that are going to come to us and that we're going to go through. They don't have to do with the absence of God. And in many cases, they have nothing to do with God. They have to do with a culmination of events that have taken place upon planet Earth. And a lot of people get into debate about God permits this and God doesn't permit that. But the fact is that God is a constant reality, and that God's feeling about us and the world, the divine, doesn't ever change. And so God's love for you and me and the world has never changed. The divine order and divine presence has never changed. What is changing is this momentary experience that we're having in the physical life. And we know that we are more than physical beings. So what we're called to do is to, in the midst of the most difficult physical experiences, to see divine reality behind it. So we may not be able to see it. And it's very, very important for us to be able to grasp this concept of divine order if we're going to embrace the great expectations that we have, because we have to see beyond the appearance to the reality of that which is. And the reality of that which is always that you're not really, that your body is sick, but your spirit is not. You know, that your resources are lacking in the physical, but your abundant supply is available to you always from a spiritual standpoint. You'll be guided and directed. It's the same with disease. It's the same with illness. It's the same with relationships. It's the same with all of the aspects of our life. And we'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some literature so that you can continue to study the concepts and ideas that we're discussing.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California 90807, and we will rush this month's selection to you. Dr. Costello and Dr. Freelander always welcome your questions, comments, and prayer requests. Please address your requests to P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California 90807. Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. You will experience the musical talents of Ms. Denise Dumeyer. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing New Thought message. Please join us this Sunday You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.
Before the break, we were talking about great expectations and how we can cultivate those. I guess in this last half of the program, I'd like us to talk about the practical ways that we could deal with difficult times and how it is that we can have great expectations in the face of, say, limited financial resources. Or a lot of your work and my work are done with people who are in life-threatening diseases or illnesses. And we see people so often, don't we, who are faced with cancer or with other potentially terminal diseases, and some of them in the very ends of those diseases. And yet some of the people we talk to have great expectations, not expectations necessarily that they're going to be physically healed, but great expectations from the experience, and others are totally destroyed by the experience. The same with finances, the same with relationships. So why is that, do you suppose?
Well, that's, again, it's because they're accustomed to thinking of the negative aspect of life. And so they think of the negative aspect of leaving this life instead of the positive aspect. And so if we have great expectations, then we're going to know that everything's going to work out here and everything's going to work out on the inner planes after we go. And that it's just a wink of an eye between the time we leave and that those we love come. So we need to keep that positive aspect throughout our lives, throughout every part of our lives. And again, as we said earlier, it's having faith, and our faith is justified. If we don't have faith, whatever we're feeling is justified. It's whatever whoever said someone's just as happy as they make up their minds to be. Well, we are. And so if we expect wonderful things in life, that's what we'll get. If we expect negative things in life, that's what we'll get.
I think of someone whom we know that has had cancer and passed away from cancer and was involved in our church and our fellowship, and in the very early stages of her diagnosis was so depressed and which is normal, it's natural, was so depressed by the diagnosis, and then the treatment was very debilitating. And then as she moved through the disease and through the process, she came to live out the teaching that she understood so much from our faith tradition, because she's understood it. She's been a student of it for years, for many years. And so after several months, and she was moving through the disease process, very, very, a lot of pain from time to time. And she said to me one day, I'm just really anticipating what great good is going to come out of this, because I know there's some good in this experience. Well, she was talking about her cancer. She was talking about her illness. She was talking about her life. She was talking about her family and her relationship. And here in the throes of a terminal disease, moving rapidly towards the end of it, she was looking for what was going to be good in that relationship. And as we know, she went into this in the normal process with her concerns and her sadness. By the end of this disease, she was dying, and she died in an almost painless state, as we know. She was able to transcend the pain because of the way that she looked at the circumstance and situation. She wasn't fearful. She didn't have any really preconceived expectations, except that whatever is going to happen is okay, and I'm fine, and my family is here, and a lot of good things had happened in the course of the disease. And so it had to do with the way she felt about it and the way she was thinking about it. And then I think of Lorena, the organist in our church for many years, who once told me, and is now living far away from us, but she was getting older, and she said to me, I think that someday I may have to go to a nursing home. And so usually when an older person says that to me, they're going to tell me how bad that's going to be. And she said, I think someday I'm going to have to go to a nursing home. And she said, I think that that'll be a wonderful thing to do, because she said in the 30s I had TB, and I was in the TB SAN, and it was a wonderful experience because I got to rest all I wanted to. They brought me my food. It was a great place. Now, her view of a nursing home was, and of course there are good nursing homes and bad nursing homes, but Lorena's expectation was, if that's to be, then it's going to be a good experience, and I'll end up in a good place. So it's a mindset, and it's the way we think about it, isn't it?
Yes, it's a perception. We go through life on a perception. And those of us who are still raising children, we go through life on a perception that the children are either going to be a lot of work and a lot of trouble, or they're going to be a joy and they're going to do well. And if we expect our children are going to do well, most often they do well.
Those expectations, back to the expectations.
Exactly. And so, and it's imprinted on our children, our expectations for them. And it's rare that children don't go along the way the parents programmed them.
Expect them, yeah.
Yes, with their great expectations.
Finance, we need to touch on that because, of course, abundance and prosperity is a lot of what we teach in New Thought. And we teach that prosperity and abundance are accessible to us, and that prosperity and abundance begins with our way of thinking. And the aspect of financial difficulties, and of course, we know that New Thought and metaphysicians are faced with financial reverses many times. But as we have financial reverses, we can either see those as horrible and fearful, or we can see them with the potential that they bring, and that is that some way we're going to be guided and directed into a new job or new direction, and that the financial resources that we need will be provided. And that becomes a way of thinking so that we are expecting the prosperity and the abundance, to eliminate the poverty. And when we have that mentality and that way of thinking, then we are guided and directed. Now, it doesn't mean that we fold our hands and wait for the divine to give us what we need. And of course, many people think that. And so one of the things we teach in metaphysics is this idea of let go and let God. We need to finish that by let go and let God guide me and direct me in the things that I should do, because we have to do things. But we do need to change our way of thinking about our financial resources, and we do need to have expectations that our resources and our needs will be met, and that prosperity and abundance are right, and they are available to us. But it takes work, it takes goals, it takes direction. And if we open ourselves, the divine will guide us and direct us and provide for our abundant supply.
Yes, and I saw a cartoon just yesterday of a little boy talking with his grandmother, who was obviously an older lady, and he says, "Grandma, what do you do when you run out of money?" And she said, "Without." And this is something a lot of people can't conceive that they do without. But I think the older generation lives, especially those who lived through the Depression, the Great Depression, can remember when they did without, and they were just as happy. And I've seen a lot of people who are of that age level who say those were the happiest times of their lives because they bonded with their families. They spent time together, eating together instead of going out to expensive places, and that's how they had their recreation. And so again, we can just have it's what we expect. If we expect that life is going to be wonderful, although we're short on finances, it'll be wonderful. It's how we handle the situation.
It's how we handle it and how we feel about it, and most importantly, how we think.
Yeah.
And just as I said at the top of this program, and we say so often in our talks and in our messages and at the church and in our counseling, we live in our minds. And the way that our minds operate determine the quality of our life. If we have great expectations, if we see the positive, if we claim divine order, if we're able to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is a divine resource that is accessible and available to us that can never turn its back on us, and that we can never be separated from it, then our way of thinking is transformed. We are empowered, and we're able to deal with circumstance and situation. And it doesn't ever mean that life will be easy. But what it does mean is that it will be easier because of the expectations we have and because of the assurance that we have in our own way of thinking. And the wonderful thing is that we share that with others, we share with our families, we share with our children and our circle of friends, and then they come to understand this, and they transform and change their way of thinking and have great expectations.
Yes, and again, it makes life so much more beautiful for the people around us. It's not just our own lives that we are enriching and the lives of our family, but for everyone around us. And it makes for heaven on earth, doesn't it?
It does. And it invites us and reminds us again of the connectiveness that we have one for another, and how important it is for those who have the ideas and concepts that we share to be able to demonstrate them and to share them with others so that they can see that these principles work, and that this idea of changing our way of thinking can indeed change our life, and that it has to do with changing our life and aligning ourselves with something that's divine, and we don't have to define that, and we don't have to change that. And so whether we're, Catholic or Confucian or Baptist or Buddhist, doesn't matter. And it's true for everybody. And these are principles that are universal, and they're principles that can be applied to anyone's life.
Yes, and it's caring for others and looking out for others and remembering that God is love and we can exercise that love. I know a young man who said to his mother about an older woman, she taught us how to love, didn't she? And that woman just really gave them attention at time, and not over much, but just attention when she was with them and made them feel important. And that's a very lovely thing for a child to think that someone taught them how to love, and we all deserve to be surrounded with that kind of emotion and living.
And that mother love is really what a mother is always telling their children: it's going to be all right. It's
Yes.
going to be all right.
Yes.
And that's what the universe and that's what God says. It's going to be all right. And it is, if we could only believe it and embrace it and make it a part of our own lives. And we know that the information that we've shared with you has been useful, and we hope that you've enjoyed what we have been talking about and that you'll be able to apply it to your own life. We look forward to seeing you next time.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California 90807, and we will rush this month's selection to you. Dr. Costello and Dr. Freelander always welcome your questions, comments, and prayer requests. Please address your requests to P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California 90807. Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. You will experience the musical talents of Ms. Denise Dumeyer. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing New Thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.